They said Oldtown stank of tar and tide and rotting weed, but to Yosef Mayer it always smelled faintly of opportunity. From the top of the harbor tower, the Honeywine below was a smear of dull pewter, speckled with hulls. Barges and cogs, wine casks and wool bales, a Florent galley edging in with tattered sails like a beggar's cloak. Beyond the river mouth lay the whispering sound, chill and gray under a low sky. Out there, the Redwyne Fleet was forming. 200 warships, Lord Leighton's steward had boasted once at a feast, wine purple and smug. The mightiest oaken forest ever to float, my Lord Mayor. The Ironborn will learn to fear Reachish timbers. Yosef shaded his eyes with the flat of his palm. On the horizon, dark strokes moved against the light. Lines of hulls, sails furled tight against the sullen wind, banners whipping. Arbor grapes, he thought, and iron and salt, wine and war. It always came back to that. Behind him, within the tower chamber, the ledger waited on its stand. Columns of ink, tidy and black, listing births and duties, tariffs paid, tariffs owed. The ink was Yiddish, good purple stuff from the city of Yin. The hand that wrote it had learned its curves in the shadow of jade pagodas. Yosef dipped that same hand now into a Hightower jar of cheap reach ink and scrawled in the margin, Redwyne War Galleys, 137 sighted. He did not note the names. Names changed. Hulls burned or rotted. Numbers mattered. Behind the harbor and the Hightower, Oldtown sprawled in crooked lanes and tiled roofs, septs and smithies, and the squat bulk of the citadel with its raven towers and smoke. The Hightower rose above all of it, its great beacon unlit for the daylight hours, pale stone thrusting skyward like a finger pointing at the gods. The maesters liked to say Oldtown was the oldest city in Westeros, oldest and richest. Yosef let them say it. The citadel had never seen Yin. He'd seen both. In Yin, the palaces sat upon stone roads older than any Andals, their beams lacquered in a dozen shades of red and gold, their roofs scaled in green tiles that flashed like dragonbacks when the sun struck them. There, incense coiled like sleeping snakes around jade pillars, and barges bigger than the starry sept's footprint slipped down rivers choked with trade. Here, the greatest wonder was a tower with a fire on top, and a school full of tired old men who thought wildfire was sorcery and not merely poor bookkeeping of saltpeter and oil. Still, he had come. The house of the 10,000 scales did not grow fat by ignoring backwaters. Even a shallow creek could yield gold, if you knew where to pan. Below, on the Oldtown quays, dock hands shouted and pointed. The wind carried their calls up to him in scraps of sound. Redwynes! Tyrell banners, see? 7 save us! Look at them! Yosef's Westerosi ear was good enough to catch the fear under the excitement. Reachman had long memories for hunger, and long soft lives since. The Ironborn raids had gnawed at that softness, like rats at a granary door. Euron Greyjoy's name was a bruise they pressed unwilling too often. Euron, he thought. The crow's eye. The kraken on the throne of rocks. When Yosef had been a boy in Yin, sitting cross-legged on cool stone and practicing his figures, the gulls on the Jade Sea had carried stranger names. Lannister and Baratheon, Tyrell and Stark. Westeros existed then chiefly as stories sailors told to pass the voyage. They spoke of castles like Casterly Rock, a lion-shaped mountain that was hollow, tombed out into glowing halls, where the walls themselves sweated gold. They called it the Lost City of the Sunset, a place where you could peel the stone like fruit and find coin in every layer. They spoke of a wall of ice at the world's end, taller than any pagoda, haunted by dead kings and blue demons. Of a vale whose castle floated amongst the clouds, perched on a dagger's point, its only road a narrow ledge where the sky swallowed careless men. To Yosef, those had been no more real than the pearled palaces at the bottom of the Jade Sea that Leng's fisherfolk muttered about. Wonders to tally, not to touch. Years later, counting house in Oldtown under his feet, honey wine in his cup instead of sweet fermented rice, he knew better. Casterly Rock was not hollow. It was full. Mines and vaults and tunnels, and Lannisters. A fortress that had never fallen, and never would, so long as the gold flowed. The wall was real ice, and real stone, and real hard men freezing on it. The Vale existed, with its eyrie, eagle's nest on the spine of the world. Still, the tales clung like cobweb. In Yi Ti, the rock had become a merchant's proverb. As rich as the lion's lost city, they said in the counting halls of Yin. Men planned voyages to Lannisport, just to sniff the gold dust on the wind. Shanayan had once toyed with the fancy of sending Yosef west with a caravan of silks and fire powders to buy a Lannister bride and a wedge of Casterly Rock itself. Instead, he had sent him to Oldtown. West first, then north, the old man had told him, rolling a dried plum between yellow teeth. Oldtown has books and bells and ports, and Casterly Rock has gold. The wall and the Vale have little we can carry home, but what men believe about them, that we can trade. Write it all down, little Yosef. The 10,000 scales sell truths and lies alike, if they balance right on the ledger. So he wrote. That was why he stood on a cold reach tower, wrapped in a Yitish silk cloak, while the Redwyne Fleet made ready for holy slaughter. A bell rang below, once, twice, thrice. Harbor bell. The harbor master was starting his tally. A throat cleared behind Yosef. Master Mayor? Yosef did not turn at once. Heron, he said. How many? The clerk came to stand beside him, nervous hands buried in his shabby cloak. Heron was Oldtown born, with the soft face of a man who had eaten enough all his life and never crossed a real sea. 84 war cogs so far, he said, and more on the way. Reaches as far as the eye can see, the Redwyne banners. And ours? Yosef asked. Heron blinked at the horizon. The Yitish ships? None in harbor, master. Lord Hightower's men keep them on the outer anchorage, further out past the Sound. They say they don't trust them near the city walls. Yosef's mouth curled, amused without warmth. Our ships, he said mildly, are where we wanted them. Far enough to watch, close enough to run in when the moment changes. Heron looked at him sidelong. Run into what? I thought they came as merchants. And, well, as friends. Do you? Yosef rested his elbows on the stone parapet. Tell me, Heron, when pirates take your casks, do you send only priests and banners? Or do you send men with axes and hammers besides? The clerk's gaze dropped, cheeks blotching red. You send both, he muttered. The house of the 10,000 scales is no more foolish than House Hightower, Yosef said. Euron Greyjoy hung our men from his mastheads, same as he hung the Arbor folk.